Hello, and welcome to another great story at the Easy English Stories home channel, where we dive deep into the journey of learning English with ease and effectiveness. Today, I want to share something very personal and valuable with you all: how I learned English easily and smoothly. It wasn't an overnight success, but rather a journey filled with techniques, strategies, and yes, a few stumbles along the way. I'm not here to promise you a magic formula, but I can assure you that with the right mindset, tools, and a bit of patience, learning English can be much smoother than you might think. Whether you're a complete beginner or you've been trying to improve your skills for a while, this story will guide you through real-life examples, concrete strategies, and a few personal stories that show you how I navigated the twists and turns of language learning. Now, before we dive into the story, a quick word about our channel, Easy English Stories. Home Channel is all about making language learning less intimidating and more enjoyable. We explore stories, experiences, and tips from different learners who have walked this path. So, if you're serious about improving your English and want to enjoy the journey, you're in the right place. So, let me start from the beginning. I wasn't always confident with English. In fact, like many people, I struggled with pronunciation, grammar, and even listening comprehension at first. I remember the days when listening to native speakers felt like they were speaking at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But here's the thing: those struggles are not permanent, and that's the first lesson I want to share today. When I first began learning English, I didn't have the benefit of language apps or YouTube tutorials. Instead, I relied on traditional classroom learning. While this gave me a foundation, I quickly realized that it wasn't enough to make me fluent. I knew I had to supplement my learning with real-life experiences and immersive techniques. So, how did I do it? Well, it started with listening. Really listening. One of the first things I did was to surround myself with English. Now, I don't mean just sitting down with a textbook, but actually engaging with English as it's spoken in everyday life. I started with something simple, watching movies with subtitles. But I didn't just sit passively and let the words wash over me. No, I made it an active process. I would pause the movie whenever I didn't understand something, jot down new phrases, and repeat them out loud. This might sound tedious, but trust me, it works wonders. Take a movie like The Lion King. You might think it's just for kids, but it's a gold mine for learning conversational English. The dialogue is clear, the sentences are simple, and the storyline is engaging. I remember watching it over and over, each time understanding a little more. Eventually, I could watch it without subtitles and understand almost everything. It was a huge confidence boost. A lot of learners underestimate the power of listening. Here's a concrete statistic. Research shows that listening accounts for about 45% of communication in our daily lives, while speaking comes in second at 30%, followed by reading at 16% and writing at 9%. So, if you focus on improving your listening skills, you're already mastering a large part of communication. By just dedicating 30 minutes a day to listening, you can significantly improve your understanding of the language. Now, another game changer for me was immersing myself in English. Not just listening, but creating an environment where I was constantly exposed to the language. This was before online language communities were as common as they are now, so I had to be a bit creative. I started listening to radio stations in English. I also switched all my devices, my phone, my computer, even my social media, to English. This simple switch made a big difference because it forced me to think in English even during everyday tasks. One thing that really helped was joining English-speaking clubs. Even though I wasn't living in an English-speaking country, I sought out groups that practiced English. We'd meet weekly, and the rule was, no matter how much you struggled, you had to speak in English. At first, I was self-conscious, worried about making mistakes or sounding awkward. But over time, I realized that everyone was there for the same reason, to improve. And it's in these moments of discomfort where real learning happens. For example, I once participated in a debate at one of these clubs, and let me tell you, it was tough. I struggled to keep up with the conversation, but by the end of it, I had picked up so many new phrases and expressions. It was one of the most challenging yet rewarding experiences of my language journey. Let's talk about grammar for a minute. I know a lot of learners get stuck on it. They think they need to perfect their grammar before they can speak or write fluently. And while grammar is important, it's not something that should paralyze you. In fact, I found that the more I practiced speaking and writing, the more naturally the grammar started to come. It's kind of like riding a bike. You don't need to understand all the mechanics before you start pedaling. I didn't sit down with grammar books for hours on end. Instead, I picked up grammar through context. For example, I would notice patterns in sentences while watching TV shows or reading books. And when I wasn't sure about something, I'd look it up. This way, I was learning grammar organically, without it feeling like a chore. The same goes for vocabulary. I didn't try to memorize long lists of words. Instead, I made it a point to learn words and phrases that were relevant to my life. Let's say I was learning how to cook a new recipe. I'd look up the English words for all the ingredients and cooking techniques. This made the vocabulary stick because I was actually using it in a real context. A helpful tip I discovered is the 20-80 rule in language learning. 20% of the words you know are used 80% of the time in everyday conversation. This means that if you focus on learning the most commonly used words, you'll be able to understand and communicate much more effectively. It's like building a strong foundation before adding the fancy decorations. As the saying goes, practice makes perfect. But I'd say, practice makes progress. I made it a point to practice speaking English every single day, even if it was just talking to myself in the mirror. Yes, it felt a little silly at first, but it helped me build confidence. I would pretend I was having a conversation with someone, and over time, I stopped feeling self-conscious. One thing I highly recommend is finding a language partner. It could be a friend, a colleague, or even someone online. I had a language partner who was also learning English, and we'd practice speaking for about 15 to 20 minutes a day. We'd talk about anything, what we had for breakfast, our weekend plans, or even what was happening in the news. These small conversations helped me become more comfortable with everyday English. And here's an interesting fact. According to a study conducted by the Foreign Service Institute, it takes about 600 to 750 hours of study to achieve fluency in a language like English. That might sound like a lot, but if you break it down into daily practice, it becomes much more manageable. By practicing for just 1 hour a day, you can significantly accelerate your progress. Learning a language isn't just about mastering vocabulary and grammar, it's also about mindset. I found that staying motivated was key to my success. There were times when I felt frustrated or hit a plateau, but I reminded myself that every small step counts. Whether it was understanding a new word or being able to hold a longer conversation, these milestones kept me going. Another thing that helped was setting realistic goals. Instead of aiming to be fluent within a few months, I focused on small, achievable goals. For example, I'd aim to learn 5 new words a day or watch a TV show without subtitles. These little victories added up over time and gave me the motivation to keep pushing forward. And remember, mistakes are part of the process. I made plenty of them along the way. Mispronounced words, grammar blunders, and even cultural misunderstandings. But instead of being discouraged, I saw each mistake as a learning opportunity. It's important to be kind to yourself during the learning process and recognize that progress is progress, no matter how slow. So, there you have it. How I learned English easily and smoothly. It wasn't always easy, but by immersing myself in the language, practicing daily, and staying motivated, I was able to make steady progress. And the best part? You can do it too. Whether you're just starting or you've been learning for a while, remember that consistency is key. Surround yourself with English, practice as much as you can, and most importantly, enjoy the process. Language learning is a journey, not a race, and every step you take brings you closer to your goal. Thank you for joining me today. I hope my story has inspired you and given you some practical tips to apply to your own learning journey. Keep pushing forward, and before you know it, you'll be speaking English with ease and confidence. Until next time, keep learning, keep practicing, and keep going your way to fluency.